Today's video, I'm going to show you guys the steps needed to calibrate a UT Olympus Epic 650 scope. So, for this purpose of this video, we're going to be using a D790 dual element, and we're going to be using the step wedge, which is 0.100 to 0.500. So we're going to turn this on. While that turns on, let me show you guys something really neat. This website actually breaks down all the velocities of different materials that you can use, like silver, steel, stainless steel, Teflon, tin, titanium. So for our purpose, we're going to be using this one, which is 2320. This is the velocity of carbon steel. So now there's several steps that we got to take. And one of the first steps that we got to verify is that our velocity is where it should be. It should be at 2320. So this might actually change as we are calibrating our scope. So I'm going to change it for the moment to 2320. Just that's where it should be. But if it changes a little bit, it doesn't matter as long as it stays within a range or a close proximity of 2320. We should still be okay. Now, what we're going to do next is we're gonna check that we have a sufficient screen range, which we do because we're using a half inch carbon steel cal block. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the screen range to a 1 inch, and the way you change that is you could use this knob either to scroll it, and as you can see, it will either increase or decrease it depending on whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise. There's a little shortcut that I personally like to use, is using this button that says range. So I'm just gonna go to an inch for this purpose. You could go to a half inch, that's fine, this is your preference. I'm gonna personally go to a 1 inch range. So what we're gonna do next, so there's a little shortcut. As you can see, we're in this display. Every time you hit this back arrow button, it's gonna make you go back to this display setting, which is actually pretty neat because you're gonna need it in a bit. So there's another step that we gotta do, is make sure that your mode is on dual, because we are using a dual element. Is this a D790, and it is a dual element because there's a receiver and a transmitter into this, so therefore it's called a dual. As you can see, there's like a little line, there's a little bit of a glare, but there's a little line that kind of spaces that out. So our next step is to make sure that all this looks fine. And frequency, this D790 has a frequency of 5 megahertz, which it's where it should be. If you wanted to change that, if you're using a different transducer that it might use either a 10 or whatever, you could always just change that and you use this little knob again. So we're gonna go to the receiver. So our filter is good because we're using a 5 megahertz transducer, and as you can see, the filter is within this range, and we're kind of like in the middle, so we're good. You could always mess with this and just change it and see what your signal is, but I would recommend that you guys stay within your ranges. So angle, we're going to be using 0 degree angle. Thickness, this is more like for shear wave. If you want to change it for this purpose, we will not be using that. So our next step, having gotten to this point, as you can see, there's this auto cal button. We will not be using it for the moment. We're going to just hit this next button, and it's gonna take us to this display where it says gate 1, gate 2, and gate setup. For this purpose, since we're only gonna be calibrating at the moment using straight beam, we're gonna be using this function right here. We're gonna just check that this is correct. So depending on your company procedure, your level gate, which it's moved using this scroll button, as you can see. Oops, I'm gonna click that. It's gonna elevate it either up or it's gonna lower it, but we're gonna use a 20% for that. Our width, I mean, this you could change it as you please. And our start, this basically moves your gate. So as you can see, So I mean, this for the moment being is okay. So we're gonna go to gate setup. So if you wanted to turn on your echo to echo, you would actually turn your second gate along too. As you can see, we have another gate. Usually for my company procedure, the level of where that gate should be is at 15, and this, well, you just move it more or less where you need it to be. But for this purpose, or for the time being, I'm gonna turn that off just so it won't confuse you. And we're gonna go to gate setup. So as you can see, it's a good way. This is a good thing to have your gate percentage amperes is high. That way it actually, every time you hit auto 80, it just puts it right where it should be. Your peak should be right at 80. So for this purpose, we're going to be using edge. So for some companies, if your procedure says that you got to do coating piping and you want to do peak to peak, you can change that. Peak to peak, as you can see, it changes it. But for right now, we're going to use edge. So now, having gone over that, we're gonna go to next, and it's gonna take you to this screen over here, and display setup, measure setup, insert setup. So we're gonna hit display setup, and it takes us to this spot. As you can see, all of this is just personal preferences. How bright your scope should be, what kind of mode you want it to be. I personally like it to be outdoor because usually I work on outside, and there's a lot of glariness that appears with the sun. So I have it at the y-axis of 100. You could change that to 110. It doesn't really matter. It's just whatever you want, however you want it. So I'm actually gonna go back because this is not where I wanted to be, but I wanted to show you guys how I have this set up so you could have that in your scope if you want to. So we're gonna go here. So this is gonna actually change the units. For example, you got x.xx, and this is just like how your scope is gonna measure your thickness. So you could change that. For example, if you guys only use 0.00 increments, well then you can have that, but I'm gonna have it at 3. That's fine. For our next step is we're actually gonna verify that our reading setup is okay. As you can see, we actually have 5 boxes, 1 2 3 4 5, and going here, depending on what you move here, will actually change these. So it just depends on what you want to change. You could mess with it and see what changes what, but for my purpose, how I have it at this very moment, I have current amplitude at reading 1, my box 2 is off, reading 3 is gate 1 to gate 2. This is usually used for echo to echo. I like to have it there in case I do echo to echo, or if I'm doing a pipe that is bare and then I come across an area that is coated, so I could actually read that, having known that I'm calibrated to echo to echo. But that's another thing we're gonna talk later on. So for this purpose, we are at thickness, and this display, as you can see, is reading 5, and we're talking about this digital display right here as at reading 5. So this was number 1, which gives us our amplitude, and this was what I was talking about, the echo to echo coding, but we're not going to use that right now. We're just going to focus on this. So now we will begin with our calibration part.